okay to fail as long as you learn from failure and don't make the same mistake again. That the United States needs to have a hybrid warfighting fleet, going forward. We need to have more robotic and autonomous systems. We need to have them very soon.
Hello, and welcome to the Skapa Podcast, Creating the Future, with me, Michael Brasseur, where we bring visionary leaders across government, academia, and industry to share their big, bold visions of the future, but more importantly, how do we turn those ideas into reality? And we're joined by a very special guest today, Michael Robbins, CEO and President of AUVSI. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm excited to be here.
On the podcast, we really like to get to know our guests on a very sort of personal and professional level. And I would like to sort of track your professional life, starting at the University of Michigan. First of all, why University of Michigan, and what did you study there?
Yeah, go blue. I started off in engineering, but quickly fell in love with the more political side of campus life, and switched into political science and communications. And while at university, the 2000 census had taken place, and there was a redistricting, which takes place after each census, and Michigan lost a congressional seat. And my hometown congressman was redistricted into the same district as another member of Congress. From Ann Arbor, from that part of the district. And I decided I was going to help out my hometown congressman win re-election. And that sort of launched my my career into first politics and then later government, and and on from there.
Interesting. So you were like 20, 22?
I was 19 when I started working for the congressman, Congressman the late John Dingell. And a lot of my friends were supporting the sort of Ann Arbor incumbent, who was the more sort of progressive candidate and was a little bit newer to Congress, whereas my hometown congressman had been in Congress for a very long time, but had a tremendous record of achievement. And for me, it was really about like results and outcomes versus like someone who maybe said a lot of the right things, but had like no record of accomplishment. And to me, it was obvious, like, why wouldn't we want the guy who's been like fighting and winning for Michigan representing us in Congress versus the person who just says things that people like and applause, but actually has passed zero bills. Yeah,
it's such an interesting perspective because that's, we're very selective in terms of who we invite on this podcast, because we like people who've done what they've said, have painted a big, bold vision of the future, but actually delivered on it. So I can totally relate to what you were saying there. So you end up joining his staff, is that correct?
Yeah, so you at 19, and became his chief of staff at 23. So I was the youngest chief of staff on Capitol Hill by many years, maybe a decade at the time, which was a pretty wild experience. And I was definitely in over my head at first, but you learn on the job and trial by fire. And he was very accepting that mistakes would happen, and as long as there was growth from those mistakes and didn't make the same mistake twice, he was very forgiving. And it was an incredible, 6.5 years as his chief of staff, 10 years overall in that office, and grew a lot, learned a lot, built a network in DC, sort of learned the legislative process very well.
Wow, that's fascinating to start out that young on Capitol Hill. And so that kind of took you to your early 30s?
Late 20s.
Late 20s? Yeah. Okay. And then what'd you do next after that?
Yeah, so I joined the Airline Pilots Association to lead their government affairs, safety, and communications work, and that was really interesting because I had always sort of had an interest in aviation, but really I joined more out of the force of personality of the president at the time, a Marine and a Navy fighter pilot named Lee Moak, who Chemo was his call sign, who's now my best friend and former business partner. Who just had a vision for how to sort of elevate safety and how to elevate the narrative around global competitiveness for the U.S. airline industry. He was a very unique labor leader in that he was very willing to work with management and sort of to better the industry, which, knowing that if the industry is doing better, then the pilots would do better, which is a very different approach than a lot of labor leaders take, where it's sometimes a bit more adversarial. Yeah. I liked his vision, so I joined his team.
And then after that, you went off and started your own thing, is that correct?
Yeah, so Chemo and I started a consulting firm. We had about a dozen different clients, doing public affairs work, strategic communications, some problem solving, business consulting. We kind of just had like a say yes attitude. So, whatever sort of project was sort of floated to us, we would do it. So we had clients as diverse as, Delta Airlines and SpaceX, the Plant-Based Foods Association, and ultimately AUVSI. And AUVSI became a client. So.
Okay. Now, if I recall, you're also a naval reservist. Is that correct? When did you join the Navy Reserves?
Yeah. So I did that a little bit later in life, in my 30s.
Okay.
It was something that I had actually been interested in doing when I was younger, but started working for the Congress when I was 19, and just never really had that chance. He was a very demanding boss, so there was no time there to do anything else other than 80, 100 hours a week for him. And actually, I had been really interested in the Marines and had intended to maybe pursue that, but doors closed as you get older, and I was working on a project in my early 30s where we had brought on the former Vice Admiral of the U.S. Navy Reserve, John Cotton. Balls was his call sign. Great guy. And we were having lunch together at the Army Navy Club, and I said, I don't have any regrets in my career. Things have gone great. But if I had one, it's that I never, served in uniform as I intended. He's like, well, you still can. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think I'm a little old for that now. And he said, no, there's a program that the Navy has where they accept people a little later in life that have skills that are maybe be useful to the Navy. He's like, I think you would be a tremendous asset. And the next day I started pursuing that, and maybe 8-9 months later was commissioned as a naval officer. So.
Yeah, a little backstory here. First of all, I still thought you were in your 30s. I think I asked you that at the last board meeting. I actually tried to recruit you out to Task Force 59 when I found out you were in the Naval Reserves. Yeah. We couldn't sort of align schedules. You had too much going on, but that would have been a blast to work with you in that regard.
Definitely something I wanted to do. I think my community in the Navy was a little hesitant about letting me go out to something that they didn't quite fully understand at the time. Yeah. But looking back on that, the work that you did as the Commodore of Task Force 59 really set the stage for so much of the transformation that the Navy's now in, which maybe we'll talk more about. But it would have been an awesome opportunity to come out and join you.
Well, and the Naval Reserves were such a key part of that. Tom McAndrew was my deputy, Sky Moore,
Elsa.
Chief Strategy Officer, Sophia Haft, Elsa Kania, just rock star reserves that really helped bring Task Force 59 to life. But more than that, helped us imagine a future that was different than the past. And that's kind of the focus of the podcast here. So I was really sorry I didn't get to work with you there, but I do have the pleasure of working with you at AUVSI. I'm on the board there for our viewers, but you're leading that. And so walk me through, first of all, what is AUVSI? Sure. What are you guys working on? And share for us a little bit your vision of what you plan for the future of AUVSI.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And you're a big part of that as a member of the board, helping us with our strategic guidance. AUVSI is the world's largest trade association dedicated to uncrewed systems, robotics, and autonomy. So we represent companies, academia, research institutes across the spectrum of the air, ground, maritime, space, cyber domains, in both commercial and defense. So those that are trying to incorporate and utilize autonomy for commercial and warfighting capabilities. We've been around for 52 years. It actually started at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base by some guys that came back from Vietnam and thought, hey, maybe there's a way we can use sort of like remotely piloted vehicles to help with the mission. And it sort of evolved, many, many times over the years, has evolved a lot. But, today we're about 35 people, here at DC and around the country, sort of working on the mission of incorporating autonomy and taking it from something that's sort of, novel and sort of outside the mainstream and trying to make it accepted and very much mainstream for both use for the movement of people and goods and as well as for the future of warfighting. Because ultimately, as you know, robots don't bleed, and putting robots forward, whether it's for congested logistics or for strike or decoys or whatever the mission, you're doing something with a robot instead of a human.
how many companies and how many folks do you represent?
We have about 400 companies across the board. Of that, about 160 of them are sort of like corporate members, including Skapa, and then companies, on the very small end, like startups, maybe just 15, 20 people, all the way up to some of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah. And so we actually leveraged Exponential back in 2024, which is in San Diego, to launch Skapa by Saab.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah,
that was a lot of fun. That was a great. That was just a fantastic event. Exponential brings about 10,000 people.
Right. Yeah,
okay. And it was a wonderful platform to launch our new autonomy and AI effort based in San Diego called Skapa by Saab. And we had just a wonderful experience there, and been really enjoying our membership as well.
You were also a keynote speaker in 2023. We told your sort of Task Force 5/9 story as well.
Yeah, so that was my Be Bold speech.
Yes, that was awesome.
And I gave that speech also at Saab when I first arrived. And then afterwards they said, "I'm sorry, did you say be bald? Be bald, be bald." And a lot of our leadership is bald, but we got a good kick out of that. All right, Michael. So what are you working on now that's got you really excited?
So we're in this transformational age of autonomy. Okay. Like the Department of War has woken up. Like they're seeing the lessons from Ukraine and other conflict zones around the world, and recognize that the United States needs to have a hybrid warfighting fleet. Going forward, we need to have more robotic and autonomous systems. We need to have them very soon. Yeah. So a lot of what we're working on is both the congressional funding, the congressional budget direction, and then the actual transformation within the Pentagon, the COCOMs, and the service branches to help drive the integration of robotics and autonomous systems into the hands of warfighters. And that's easier said than done. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening right now, but there's no doubt that in the last 2 years, really, the lessons from Ukraine in particular have changed the thinking of both Congress and of the Pentagon. And now we're trying to turn that motion into movement and actually get things out and fielded.
It's so interesting because to see where your career started and to see where you are now, that early start on the Hill is actually a key.
It is.
It's very essential to your success. That's why you're so effective on the Hill. I see you up there a lot, as a matter of fact. How much time do you spend on the Hill?
I'd love to spend more. Getting this job getting pulled in a lot of different directions, but I'm on the Hill probably once or twice a week. I've testified, I think, 4 times now before Congress, with a couple more coming up. And those are great opportunities to sort of tell our story and get our narrative out there. But a lot of times what I'm doing is just meeting with members of Congress, meeting with their staff, and sort of ensuring that they understand both the problem, but also the opportunity and how they can help, whether that's through dollars, whether that's through direction to the agencies. One of the things that we're working on right now is trying to make sure that the right lessons from Ukraine are learned, because a lot of times, candidly, I think some warfighters, some leaders are sort of admiring the problem a little bit and looking at technology that's working in Ukraine right now and saying, we want that. And our answer to that's you probably don't actually. Yeah. What you want is going to be a little bit different. You need to look at the next war, the future fight, not sort of replicate what the Ukrainians have today. That's probably not going to be very relevant to the fight we're going to have tomorrow.
And how would you assess sort of the tech literacy on the Hill as you engage?
It's getting better.
Okay.
It's definitely getting better. There's a real effort underway, I think, by industry, by academia, by think tanks to raise the sort of tech literacy on the Hill. Particularly given that there's a recognition that we're behind, and that we probably need to spend a lot more than people were comfortable with in just a short period of time to not only catch up to our pacing challenges, but to actually drive ahead, and doing it through a uniquely American way, and sort of unleashing the power of American dynamism and American capital. But in order to do that, Congress has to open up, their own funding streams that, private capital will then double down on or triple down on, as well as remove regulatory barriers and things that, sort of stand in the way of acquisition. That's why we've been very supportive of Senator Wicker's Forge Act, which is part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which has significant reforms to the way the Pentagon is going to approach acquisition. very supportive of Secretary Hex's reforms to the warfighting acquisition system, changing it from being the defense acquisition system that sort of stood off on its own into an integrated warfighting acquisition system that's rated on outcomes, not on process. Again, that goes back to like my early days, choosing to work for Congressman Dingell, a very effective outcome-driven legislator, like focusing on, are you achieving the mission versus are you doing the paperwork properly, which has been so much a part of the acquisition process over the last few decades. So it's been sort of mirrored in bureaucracy as opposed to like focused on actually delivering to the warfighter.
So were you involved in helping to shape some of that? Can you share that experience?
Yeah, well? we did have a number of meetings with senior leaders in the department, sharing our thoughts and sort of delivering our thought pieces and white papers on elements that could be a part of the future plan, and certainly a lot of our member companies contributed to that as well, including yourself and the team at Skapa. And that really did, I think, have an impact. What we saw, I think, from the memos that were released by Secretary Hex, as well as what he delivered in the speech just a few weeks ago, was very representative, I think, of a lot of the things that industry's been pushing for. So we were delighted to see that.
It's a very exciting time for industry. He essentially put us on a war footing.
Yeah.
How does that sort of land with your folks in your association that are not defense companies? Are you able to walk that line?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few years ago, we had another speaker at Exponential who looked out, and Exponentials are, for those not familiar, it's like our big trade show and conference each year, who asked everybody in the audience who was a defense contractor or working in the defense to raise their hand. And probably maybe half the audience did. He's like, everyone's hand should be up. Yeah. Because I think that's one of the unique elements of the robotics and autonomy industry is it's all dual use. Whether you are a defense company or not, like what you're designing can be repurposed, as we've seen time and time again in conflict zones. So I think there are companies that are in our membership that are clearly commercial focused, and they have a different set of goals. Yeah. And we have different teams that are working on those for them. We've got teams that are focused on Department of Transportation, FAA, Department of Commerce, things like that are very commercial focused. But a lot of the technology still has the dual use roadmap as well. So what we do at our core is work towards that integration, work towards the maturity of the technology, and that whether it's for commercial or defense, it's going to have positive implications for the warfighter.
And is there anything else that you're working on that we may not be aware of that you wanted to share today?
So we have an I at the end of our name for international, and like with Saab, an international company, we're definitely working on those alliances and partnerships, both with international companies as well as our partners and allies. I very much subscribe to Rush Doshi, another fellow naval reservist. His theory of success by allied scale, and recognizing that right now, U.S. has about half the manufacturing capacity of the PRC. And that's putting us at a significant disadvantage. I mean, our advantage in World War II was the arsenal of democracy. I'm from Detroit. We take a lot of pride in that. And we going back to the lessons from that, like Admiral Yamamoto did not want to attack Pearl Harbor. Like he knew that, I think his words were, he's waking a sleeping giant. He had been a attaché here in the U.S. He saw the industrial capacity of the U.S. and knew that the scale the U.S. would be able to produce would put the U.S. at a huge advantage over Japan. So he was actually opposed to undertaking the attack he was ordered to conduct. And I think there's lessons that we must take from that now, and that the war in Ukraine is a war of scale. Like the largest or one of the largest elements holding the Ukrainians back is the lack of artillery, the lack of munitions, and be able to have the capacity to sort of wage the war they want to wage versus the war they're forced to wage against the Russians, just because of the limitations on them. I think a lot of unclassified war games have shown that in a conflict with the PRC, we'd be Winchester in a couple hours, maybe a couple days at best, and we have to scale, including with a lot of robotics and autonomous systems, to ensure we have that mass. We can't achieve that entirely on our own. We have to rely on partners in Europe, in Asia, in other allied nations to help us achieve that scale, because together, as Rush has talked about, like we are far outpace China. We dwarf the output of China if we work together. But if we go it alone, we're going to be at a significant disadvantage. So we've been working on that a lot.
Where is the next exponential, or are you able to share that?
Yeah, no, it'll be next. Well, we have 2 actually next year. One in March in Düsseldorf, Germany.
Okay.
Expo EU. And that will be the first time that event incorporates the defense industry. Okay. I think that's a recognition by Europe that they need to be leaning into defense more. I was actually in Germany, in Düsseldorf for Exponential Europe last year, while Vice President Vance was at the Munich Security Conference, talking to Europe about the need for them to be more self-reliant and for their own security and defense. And I think that message has been heard, understood, and we're seeing a big day to day, cultural change, where there's a much more open embrace of sort of talking about defense and openly embracing defense. So Exponential Europe this year will have a big defense component to it. So that's in Düsseldorf in March, and then will be Exponential US will be in Detroit, the Arsenal of Democracy in May, which I'm very excited about. And we're going to be partnered this year with the Michigan Defense Expo, which is another event that takes place each spring in Michigan with NDIA. So we're going to have the 2 events sort of co-located together in Detroit in May.
Well, that's kind of like a coming home for you.
I'm excited about it. Yeah, there's no doubt. And there's a lot of fun, exciting things happening in Michigan. I think Saab has just recently opened up a manufacturing facility in Michigan. Yeah. It is the Arsenal of Democracy. And
so we just opened. We're building a new factory in Grayling, Michigan.
That's right. Yeah.
So in addition to the outstanding workforce, there's also a base nearby. That's really makes that a powerful combination. So we're really excited about the expansion in Michigan, in addition to our factories in West Lafayette, Indiana, and Syracuse, New York, Bristol, Rhode Island. So we're growing in the U.S. and it makes a lot of sense that you would go to Detroit for your next exponential.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
The podcast is the Skapa Podcast, which is about to create, to make, to shape. And we like to talk about the future's defense as we would like to create it, right? So unconstrained, informed by the past, but unconstrained by it. So with that sort of as the framing, can you paint for us what you see as the future of defense and security? So wide open question here. Take it wherever you want to go, and we'll sort of pull a few different threads based on your vision of what it looks like.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with trusted autonomy. Beginning to really take sophisticated warfighting platforms and giving them to our warfighters, and the warfighters deploying them on their behalf, as opposed to actually having to deploy sort of at the front lines themselves all the time. That's a culture change that we're undergoing right now, where we're beginning to utilize robotics more and more, but it's still very nascent. And that's both because we lack scale and have lacked the sort of acquisition process to speed those in, but also because there's still sometimes a lack of trust in the system. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what we're focused on is how to build the sort of small S standards around what is trust and how do you achieve that trust for the warfighter so they're comfortable using this technology and know it's going to cause whatever the effect or whatever the mission outcome that they're seeking with a high degree of fidelity.
Wow, that's interesting with respect to trust, and I couldn't agree more. We're doing some really interesting work on this trust and the ethical use of autonomy on a project with DARPA called Asimov. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard about it, but
I have, yeah.
Yeah, but it's really trying to bake into the decision making process of these robots the ethics and law of warfare, and these. It's a very difficult problem to solve, and we're working on it with MIT on a very important project. Just from a very sort of personal level, having experienced at the edge multiple different robots above, on, and below the water. Yeah. For me, trust is earned, between human and machine by sort of deploying in the operational environment and actually burning in the kit versus real problems. And we used to have a process at Task Force 59 called the burn-in, based off of Peter Singer's book, where where you take the robot to its operational limits, and really during that process, trust is earned between the human and the machine. And it's so important, because without it, we just simply won't use the machines to our advantage. So I think it's a very important sort of thing to focus on. What about so you said trusted autonomy. There's so much in that word autonomy. What does it mean to you and to your companies?
I think it's a sliding scale. It can mean different things in different conditions and different mission sets and different types of platforms. Sometimes it's giving a robot a set of parameters and a mission, and letting the robot then go do the mission with the parameters you've given it in that certain box you've drawn for it. Other times it's helping to reduce the cognitive load on the operator, where you're maybe you have one operator that's operating multiple systems. The systems are operating under that individual's direction, but maybe he or she is not controlling, each and every robot in that space. So based upon the type of system, the type of mission, it can range pretty dramatically. We try not to keep that sort of like in any kind of specific definition or box, because it's also evolving as the technology evolves, and I think that's very important.
First of all, I agree with you on the trusted autonomy piece, and I love that AUVSI is focused on that. How does that sort of, from the tactical now towards the operational strategic level, how does that change the future of war?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means that the future of the war is likely to have a lot more robots on the front. We're seeing that obviously already in Ukraine with small drones being the number one element of lethality. And you can argue like how much autonomy is baked into those. Some are very autonomous, some are still very much operator controlled. But both for offense and defense, consolidating the OODA loop and sort of having that be much faster than it is today is going to be the key of future warfare. I mean, it actually goes back to like Christian Bro's book Kill Chain, right? Like he talked about this. How old is that book now? 8-10 years. Yeah. We're now actually starting to, and you actually played a big role in this with Task Force 59. Take a lot of what he wrote about, a decade ago, and start to actually operationalize it and put the technology into the hands of warfighters for them to go out and build TTPs and look, also accept that sometimes it's not going to work, and that needs to be okay, because as long as, like, goes back to my lessons from Congressman Ingle, it's okay to fail as long as you learn from failure and don't make the same mistake again. And I think that's a culture change also that we have to we're working on within the Pentagon, where right now, this as a former, commandant, like failure isn't always looked kindly upon by senior officers. And that's, you're expected to succeed in every mission. But when you're incorporating new technology, like failure is going to be a part of the learning process. And right now, like that's still a culture change that's underway, where like failing is like, oh, we're canceling that program. We're that PO failed. And it's like, no, like that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it might be. But a lot of times it just means that we're going to take that failure, iterate, grow, and succeed next time by doing things a little bit differently. And that's something that is challenging, and it's absolutely necessary for things that are lower cost and attritable. These aren't always going to be super expensive, exquisite systems, which means they're sometimes going to have a little bit higher failure rate, particularly early on.
So 100% agree with you on this failure being part of the advancing process. Yeah. At Task Force 59, we learned so much through failure, and we were iterating so fast. We were just advancing our learning and our understanding, and that ability to do really tight cycles is the biggest accelerant to capability advancement. Yeah. And you see that on the battlefield in Ukraine. The other thing I wanted to sort of talk about is the kill chain, the OODA loop, because I think it's it frames what we do at Skapa by Saab. So Skapa by Saab is an autonomy and AI play. So, and it's based in the context of the OODA loop. We're really trying to collapse that OODA loop to give decision advantage to the commander, right? And so when you observe and orient, that's really about sensing and making sense of the environment. We're leveraging AI to help do that. And then when you decide and act, that's when you're going into the autonomy side of the equation. And as I mentioned, this project we're working on with Asimov, and then helping with that decision in accordance with the rules of war, the law of armed conflict. And then you actually deliver an effect, you act in the physical world. So translating digits to an act to an effect. And that's where the robots come into play. So I first of all, thank you for framing it in that way, because that's the way we think about it at Skapa by Saab. And I do agree, this is essential to solving key operational problems that the commander is faced with every single day. Okay, so we've kind of started tactical, operational, strategic. Let's sort of come up to the political level. And then again, with your AUVSI hat, obviously it's not a new technologies we're dealing with, but it's just the scale of adoption is moving very, very fast, and it's probably outstripping legislation and laws.
Yeah.
What are you doing in that space, and what do you think needs to be done to put the U.S. sort of on the front foot, the U.S. and the allies on our front foot, so we're not, sort of hamstrung by regulations or whatnot.
Yeah,
we obviously want to keep people safe. That's our mission at Saab, keeping people in society safe. But how do you navigate that and really put us on the front foot in terms of the future?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, first, get systems into the hands of warfighters and let them use them, learn from them, break them sometimes, and sort of develop TTPs around them. And that's what you were doing with Task Force 59. We're seeing more of that starting to occur throughout all of the service branches, but we're still like early days. Like that's still only a small percentage of overall integration. So we've got to definitely do better with that. That begins with both buy-in from senior leadership as well as real dollars from Congress. We got some of that in the HR1 reconciliation bill. There was about $13 billion for various autonomous programs across all domains, different types of platforms. That's real money. We've never seen that kind of money for our industry before. So now we're working with the Department of War on how they're going to spend that, because it's not appropriation. They have a lot more leeway on how to spend those dollars. So we're in the building, at least once a week, sort of having conversations with leaders across different service branches, various leadership offices on like how they're going to spend that money to actually get autonomous systems into the hands of the COCOMs in particular, to begin using them in different ways. Because what 7th Fleet needs is very different than the 5th Fleet, which is very different than 6th or 4th. So understanding, and that's a big culture change too. With the Navy, you buy an aircraft carrier, right? Like not going to vary tremendously between from the Ford to the Kennedy. But what 7th Fleet wants for their unmanned autonomous surface vessels might be very different than what 5th Fleet wants, where they're operating in very different environments. So understanding that like what works for one COCOM may not work for the other, that's another culture barrier that we're trying to overcome.
Yeah, and so I want to share sort of my thoughts on this, and it really involves two concepts. One is convergence, right? So that all of these different capabilities coming together to create new capability, and in convergence you achieve not only new capability but start to see the economies of scale. Yeah. But the other concept, and it's very, very important, is divergence. So when that capability goes to the edge, that it's adapting to the environment and meeting the needs of those warfighters to help solve their problems. And they're equally as important. That's right. And ultimately, if you can weave these together, they can really change the game, right? So, because there's stuff to be learned, about what's being done in the Middle East. Not all of it applies to the Pacific, but some of it does.
Yep.
And if you can create this mesh that translates between the convergence of the capabilities, the economies of scale there, but also the goodness that happens at the edge, I think that's going to be key to winning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that's very well said.
Yeah.
And recognizing that a big part of this also is being able to keep up with the pace of the evolving technology and not get locked into something that is current today but might not be very relevant tomorrow, and being able to continue to evolve as the technology evolves. I mean, we're making, the broader industry is making generational leaps in like onboard compute, every 6 months, 12 months. That each leap forward like opens up a world of new possibilities to be able to iterate on the edge, where you're not having to pre-engineer things, where you can do things downrange, where because of the compute power on board, the decision-making capabilities, the be able to program at the edge opens up, enormously, which to your point on the divergence, gives so much more capability into the hands of local leaders, COCOM leaders, that they've never had in the past, and maybe haven't fully grasped the possibilities of that yet.
Mm-hmm. All right, Michael. So we've covered a lot here. All the way dating back to your Michigan days. First of all, do you think they'll make it into the college football playoffs? This will probably air after they select. You're on the record.
As of today, I think probably we're going to miss this year.
I'm hoping Vanderbilt makes it. We're 8-2.
Yeah, and he's playing great.
It's we'll see what happens there. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about, that's very important to you, that you want to share with our viewers? Yeah,
I think one of the other areas that I think is important is also the defensive nature as well.
Yeah.
We tend to think I see that in the media and the industry, they focus a lot on like the offensive capabilities, but also like there's the whole defensive realm as well. We have to be able to not only defend against autonomous systems, but also use autonomous systems for defense as well. And I think that often that gets missed, particularly in defense of the homeland. I mean, I think we're going into a year in 2026 where we're going to have the World Cup. We're preparing to host the Olympics in 2028. We have big events occurring all the time, and as a nation, I think we have to do a much better job of incorporating autonomous systems as well as counter-autonomous systems to sort of protect the homeland from the threats of autonomous systems, which is a unique position to be in as a trade association promoting autonomy, but also recognizing that we have to be aware that these technologies can also be used against us. And right now, we are way behind on that. I've testified before Congress on this. They haven't updated the rules around counter-UAS detection and mitigation, for example, since 2018. Like that's a wild scenario. They couldn't even envision sort of a spiderweb attack like with the Ukrainians deployed in Russia to great effect to damage their strategic bombing fleet, like irreparably damaged. In 2018, that couldn't have even been on someone's the radar, except maybe like Peter Singer and August Cole. But very few other people were imagining that at the time. Now that is very much the world we live in. And we're behind on that space. So that's another area that AUVSI is spending a lot of time on is trying to get both Congress as well as DHS and the Department of War to get up to speed on the homeland threat and to be able to defend against it. I think we've seen a big lean forward from this Department of Homeland Security, from the White House, the President issuing executive orders, National Security Council moving out, but Congress has failed to act, and that's a real challenge.
Yeah, and it presents a much different challenge. And, I've heard it described before. Would you rather face a bear or a beehive? Right. And so with all these drones, it's hard to defend against, a beehive type, a swarm of bees. It requires a different defense mechanism, I think, and we're built for the most part to fight the bear.
We are, and it's not to say the technology to fight the beehive isn't there. It is, but we don't have the rules and regulations in place to incorporate it. We don't have the acquisition in place. In some cases, we don't even have the testing environment to prove the technology works because we're so hesitant to create a EW warfare environment here domestically that, it's hard sometimes. A lot of our companies, when they want to actually test a counter UAS system or test how their operational system works in an EW environment. They have to go overseas to do it.
Yeah.
That's something that we're working on. We're trying to get language in the National Defense Authorization Act to sort of force some changes in that.
We're actually doing some groundbreaking work here as well. We deployed our Loke system,
Great name.
to Poland, and it stands for low cost effector. Because also what we got to do is we got to switch the the cost curve. We can't be shooting $2-3 million missiles at $200,000 drones.
A lot of SM2s and 3s at Shaheeds that cost maybe $100,000 at most. So yeah.
And by all accounts, that's been a very successful deployment, including some of our radars, which have great capability in terms of seeing. And then obviously, as I mentioned, making sense of that and deciding and acting. So it comes back to that OODA loop.
That's exactly right.
And you got to turn really tight with this type of threat. All right, Michael, anything else you wanted to add? Or?
I just thank you for your leadership, both in your time in the Navy, incredible career serving our country, and particularly with your leadership as a Commandant of Task Force 59. Thank you for serving on the board of directors of AUVSI. Your strategic guidance and leadership is very much valued by me and all the staff and your fellow board members. So thank you, sir. It's great to be here.
And Michael, I can tell you, first of all, thank you very much. It means a lot coming from you. I was really looking forward to working with you at Task Force 59. I didn't get the chance to do that, but to see, to be on the board of AUVSI and see you as a leader, leading an industry, bringing people together, working on the Hill to really move the ball forward. It's been a real joy.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun
to watch. Yeah. And like I said, I thought you were only like 30 something. I didn't. You just, but it's incredible. Just what you've accomplished throughout your life, and thank you for joining us on the
Thank you for having me
on the podcast. And for our viewers, please like and subscribe the Skapa Podcast. Share with your friends. We really enjoy having you, and please do engage in the conversation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.